Like and subscribe to Smartobrains for more engaging deep dives into breaking news, politics, sociology, economics and social policy. A silent war on Nigeria's Christians, a story that spans generations, shaped by faith, hope, and unimaginable loss. For over a century, Nigeria has been a land of faith and conflict, where Christian and Muslim communities have lived side by side, sometimes in peace, often in tension. In the 1960s, violence erupted in the north. Hundreds of Christians were killed in Kano and Kaduna. The 1980s saw the Maitatsin riots, leaving thousands dead and entire neighborhoods in ashes. The roots of religious violence run deep, from colonial-era divisions to the eruption of sectarian riots in the 1980s and 1990s. In Yos, 2001, churches burned and families fled as mobs swept through the city. Survivors recall hiding in fear, praying for dawn. Over the decades, extremist groups like Boko Haram and radicalized Fulani militias have unleashed waves of terror targeting Christian villages, churches, and schools. In 2014, the world watched in horror as Boko Haram abducted 276 schoolgirls from Chibok, most of them Christian. Only a fraction ever returned home. Survivors recall the horror: night raids, burning churches, and families torn apart. Headlines from every decade tell the same story: violence, displacement, and loss. "I saw my church in flames," says Esther, a survivor from Benue. "We ran into the bush with nothing but our faith." International reports from Amnesty International, Open Doors, and the United Nations document a systematic campaign: tens of thousands killed, millions displaced, and entire communities erased. Since 2000, over 50,000 Christians have been killed in Nigeria. More than 3 million have fled their homes, seeking safety in overcrowded camps. This is not a random series of isolated incidents. It is a calculated, ideologically driven persecution that has scarred generations. Children draw pictures of burning churches and missing family members. The trauma is passed from parent to child, a silent wound that never fully heals. The psychological toll is immense. Survivors speak of trauma, fear, and the struggle to keep faith alive amid relentless attacks. In community gatherings, survivors pray, mourn, and rebuild. Their resilience is a quiet act of defiance against terror. Yet for years, the world has looked away, mislabeling this religious slaughter as a mere farmer-herder clash over land and resources. Headlines often obscure the truth. This is targeted violence, not just a dispute over land. The silence of the international community has allowed the crisis to deepen. But the evidence on the ground tells a much darker, more sinister story. A story of jihad, to drive Christians from their ancestral lands, to silence their faith, and to establish a new order. "We lost everything, but we refuse to lose hope," says Pastor Samuel, whose church was destroyed in Plateau State. The scale of this crisis is staggering, yet it receives tragically little attention. The violence is methodical and relentless, claiming tens of thousands of lives and displacing millions. Their targets are not random. Christian homes, churches, and community leaders are marked for destruction. This is the silent war on Nigeria's Christians. To truly grasp the magnitude of Nigeria's silent war against Christians, we must look beyond headlines and confront the hard data. Year by year, region by region, life by life. The numbers are staggering, but each statistic represents a family, a community, a future lost. According to the International Society for Civil Liberties and Rule of Law, over 52,000 Christians have been killed in Nigeria since 2009. The violence peaks in years like 2014, 2018, and 2021, each spike on the chart a wave of tragedy. In 2021 alone, more than 4,650 Christians were killed. These are not just numbers, they are lives cut short. Regional breakdowns reveal the epicenters of violence. Plateau, Benue, Kaduna, and Taraba states are marked in red on the map, each representing thousands of victims. In Benue alone, over 2,000 Christians were killed between 2018 and 2022. In the last 5 years alone, more than 18,000 Christian men, women, and children have lost their lives to targeted attacks. Most victims are from rural farming communities, often ambushed at night. The trauma is generational. The victims are not just numbers, they are teachers, farmers, mothers, and children. The average age of those killed is under 35. Women and children make up nearly 40% of the dead and displaced. Many children are orphaned, forced to flee, or left with lifelong injuries. Humanitarian organizations like Open Doors and Amnesty International report over 34,000 Christians injured, many with life-altering wounds. At least 5,200 women and girls have been raped or abducted since 2014. Survivors' testimonies speak of unimaginable trauma and loss. The United Nations estimates that more than 3 million Nigerian Christians have been forced to flee their homes, seeking safety in overcrowded, under-resourced refugee camps. Many camps are attacked and families live in constant fear. These statistics are likely underestimates. Many attacks go unreported, and families are too afraid to speak out. Local NGOs warn that the true toll may be far higher, especially in remote villages where access is limited. Compared to other conflict zones, Nigeria ranks among the deadliest places for Christians. Only Syria and Iraq have seen similar levels of religiously motivated killings in the last decade. The crisis is global in scale but deeply personal in impact. Behind every number is a story, like Esther, age 12, who lost her parents in Benue, or Pastor Samuel, who now leads prayers in a camp for the displaced. The trauma ripples through generations, leaving scars that statistics cannot show. Each chart, each headline, each map tells a story of suffering and survival. This is the reality behind the statistics, a crisis that demands the world's attention and action. The numbers are a call to conscience. The Yelwata Massacre stands as one of the darkest chapters in Nigeria's recent history. On June 23, 2018, as dusk settled over the quiet farming village of Yelwata in Plateau State, families gathered for evening prayers and children played in the fields, unaware of the terror about to unfold. As night fell, dozens of armed men, later identified as Fulani militants, moved in from the surrounding bush. They split into groups, encircling the village and blocking every escape route. At 10:15 p.m. the first shots rang out, shattering the silence. The militants stormed house after house, firing AK-47s and setting homes ablaze with petrol bombs. Families fled in every direction, but many were trapped. Survivor Amina remembers, "We heard shouting and gunshots. My children hid under the bed while I prayed they wouldn't find us." By midnight, the village was engulfed in chaos. Emergency calls went unanswered. Another survivor, Joseph, recalls, "I saw neighbors running, some carrying wounded children. The air was thick with smoke and screams. By dawn, more than 200 men, women, and children lay dead. Dozens more were wounded, and the village was left in ruins." A map of Plateau State shows the path of the attackers and the devastation left behind. Local Pastor Samuel described the aftermath. "There was blood everywhere. We found people hiding in the bush, traumatized and wounded. Many children were missing." Emergency responders arrived hours later, long after the attackers had vanished. The government's response was muted. No arrests were made, and officials downplayed the religious motive, calling it a clash. Survivors and local leaders demanded justice, but their pleas were met with silence. In the days that followed, the community gathered to mourn. Memorials were held for the victims and mass graves were dug. Survivors spoke of nightmares, fear, and the loss of their homes and loved ones. Yet even in the face of devastation, the people of Yelwata began to rebuild. Community members cleared rubble, rebuilt homes, and supported one another. Faith leaders led prayers for healing and children returned to makeshift classrooms. Yelwata is not alone. Similar massacres have occurred across the Middle Belt: night attacks, mass killings, and impunity for the perpetrators. Maps and survivor testimonies reveal a pattern of violence that scars entire regions, leaving communities forever changed. To truly understand the violence in Nigeria, we must examine the ideology driving it. Experts warn that beneath the headlines lies a complex web of radical beliefs, recruitment, and international support. The Fulani are one of Africa's largest and most diverse ethnic groups, with a proud tradition of cattle herding and a rich cultural heritage. The vast majority are peaceful, living in harmony with their neighbors. But a small, radicalized minority has embraced a violent jihadist ideology. Security analysts explain that this transformation is fueled by extremist preachers, online propaganda, and promises of power and belonging. Recruitment often targets isolated youth. Some are lured by money or a sense of purpose, while others are coerced or indoctrinated in religious schools and online forums. Graphics from security agencies reveal how these networks operate. Funding for these militants comes from cattle rustling, kidnapping for ransom, and support from transnational extremist groups. Financial flows are traced across borders, linking local violence to global jihadist movements. Propaganda is a powerful weapon. Videos, leaflets, and social media posts glorify violence and demonize Christians. One intercepted message reads, "Drive them out, this is our holy duty." Training camps hidden in remote forests provide weapons and tactical instruction, often with support from groups like Boko Haram and ISWAP. These alliances make the militants more dangerous and coordinated. Yet, it is crucial to remember, the overwhelming majority of Fulani reject violence. They continue their lives as peaceful herders, farmers, and community members, standing apart from the militants. The tragedy is that a radicalized minority, empowered by extremist networks and propaganda, has unleashed a campaign of terror that threatens the entire region. The distinction between peaceful Fulani and militants must never be forgotten. The campaign to eradicate Christians in Nigeria's Middle Belt is not a recent phenomenon. Its roots stretch back decades, fueled by a toxic mix of historical grievances, land disputes, and the rise of extremist ideologies. What began as sporadic violence has escalated into a coordinated, systematic effort to erase entire communities, physically, culturally, and spiritually. Satellite images reveal the devastation: villages wiped out overnight, churches reduced to ashes, and farmland seized by militants. In Jueruvo, Ghana Rap, and Kapachudu, entire families were massacred in a single night. Armed groups attacked as villagers slept, setting homes, churches, and schools ablaze. "We ran into the bush with nothing but the clothes on our backs," recalls Joseph, a survivor from Ghana Rap. "When we returned, everything was gone: our homes, our church, our history." The tactics are brutal and varied. Massacres in villages like Nwaruvo, Ghana Rap, and Kapachudu leave hundreds dead overnight. Armed groups attack at night, setting homes, churches, and schools ablaze. Survivors recount how militants use AK-47s, machetes, and petrol bombs to maximize destruction. In some cases, entire families are forced to convert at gunpoint or face execution. Abductions and sexual violence are widespread. Human rights groups estimate that since 2014, over 5,000 Christian women and girls have been abducted or raped. Many are trafficked, forced into marriage, or used as leverage for ransom. "They took my daughter in front of me. I have not seen her since," says Ruth, a mother from Benue State. Another survivor, Blessing, age 16, shares, "I still dream of the night they came. I wake up crying, afraid they will return." The destruction of cultural heritage is deliberate. Churches dating back generations are reduced to ashes, cemeteries are desecrated, and Christian symbols are defaced or replaced. In the aftermath, Fulani or Islamic names are imposed on villages, erasing centuries of Christian identity. Satellite images show before and after devastation. Entire communities wiped off the map. International jihadist networks play a critical role in this campaign. Groups like Boko Haram and ISWAP provide weapons, training, and ideological support. Arms smuggling routes cross borders, with funding traced to sources in the Sahel and beyond. Security analyst Dr. Ayo explains, "These attacks are not isolated. They are part of a transnational strategy to destabilize the region and drive out Christians." Land seizures are central to the campaign. After attacks, militants occupy farmland, driving survivors into overcrowded camps. Maps from Amnesty International and Open Doors document the spread of land occupation, with red zones marking areas where Christian populations have been displaced and replaced. Propaganda is a weapon. Extremist groups circulate videos, leaflets, and sermons calling for jihad and the establishment of a new order. Social media is flooded with messages glorifying violence and promising rewards for those who participate. One intercepted message reads, "Drive them out, take the land, this is our holy duty." The psychological toll is immense. Survivors speak of nightmares, anxiety, and the loss of hope. "My son draws pictures of burning churches," says Esther, a displaced mother. "He asks if we will ever go home." Children struggle with trauma, and many adults suffer from depression and fear. Counselors and faith leaders work tirelessly to help survivors heal, but the scars run deep. The psychological toll is immense. Survivors speak of nightmares, anxiety, and the loss of hope. Children draw pictures of burning churches and missing family members. "I see the fires every night in my dreams," says Blessing, age 14, from Plateau State. The impact on daily life is catastrophic. Farms are abandoned, crops rot, and local markets collapse. Schools are destroyed or occupied, leaving thousands of children without education. The local economy is shattered, and hunger is widespread. In some areas, up to 80% of Christian families have been displaced. Human rights organizations have meticulously documented these crimes. Reports from Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and Open Doors include satellite images, survivor interviews, and lists of destroyed villages. The evidence is overwhelming. This is a campaign of eradication, not random violence. "We have lost not just our homes but our sense of safety," says Pastor Samuel, who now leads prayers in a camp for the displaced. Human rights organizations have meticulously documented these crimes. Reports from Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and Open Doors include satellite images, survivor interviews, and lists of destroyed villages. The evidence is overwhelming. This is a campaign of eradication, not random violence. International jihadist networks play a critical role. Groups like Boko Haram and ISWAP provide weapons, training, and ideological support. Arms smuggling routes cross borders and financial flows are traced to sources in the Sahel and beyond. Security agencies warn that the Middle Belt is now a front line in a wider regional conflict. Despite mounting evidence, the international response has been slow and inadequate. The United Nations, United States, and European Union have issued statements and called for investigations, but survivors say little has changed on the ground. "We need protection, not just words," pleads Pastor Samuel from Kaduna. Yet resistance endures. Survivors and activists risk their lives to document atrocities, preserve oral histories, and keep their faith alive. Secret gatherings, digital archives, and advocacy campaigns are acts of defiance. "They can burn our homes but not our hope," says Esther, a displaced mother. "The world must not look away. The evidence is clear, the suffering immense, and the stakes could not be higher. Justice demands more than words. It demands action, solidarity, and the courage to confront evil. The campaign of eradication in Nigeria's Middle Belt is a crime against humanity. It is time for the world to stand with the persecuted, and for survivors to know they are not alone. Only through truth, remembrance, and collective action can the cycle of violence be broken. The voices of survivors, the documentation of human rights defenders, and the pressure of international advocacy are the first steps toward justice and healing. The campaign of eradication is ongoing, but so is the resistance. The world must choose silence or solidarity." One of the most troubling aspects of the crisis facing Christians in Nigeria is the repeated failure of the government and military to protect its citizens. Despite public promises and high-profile press conferences, the reality on the ground is starkly different. Survivors recount desperate calls for help that went unanswered, and communities left to fend for themselves as violence erupted. In December 2022, the village of Malagum in Kaduna State was attacked by armed militants. Survivors say they called security forces for hours, but no help arrived. Similar tragedies have unfolded in Agatu, Ganarap, and Njwaruvo, where military units were stationed nearby but failed to intervene until the violence had ended. Data from local NGOs shows that in over 70% of attacks on Christian villages between 2018 and 2023, security forces arrived hours late or not at all. In some cases, military checkpoints were less than 5 miles away. Official statements often blame logistical challenges, but activists allege deliberate neglect and even complicity. According to Amnesty International, over 60% of attacks on Christian communities between 2015 and 2023 were never formally investigated by authorities. Police reports were not filed, and perpetrators were rarely identified or prosecuted. This lack of investigation fuels a cycle of impunity and ongoing violence. International observers have sharply criticized the Nigerian government for downplaying the religious motives behind the violence and for failing to implement effective security reforms. Reports from Human Rights Watch and the United Nations highlight a pattern of delayed or absent responses, leaving survivors without protection or justice. In a rare interview, a whistleblower within the Nigerian police described orders to stand down during attacks in Benue State. "We were told not to engage," he said, "even as we heard gunfire from the villages." Survivors and activists allege that some officials are complicit, while others are paralyzed by bureaucracy and fear. Government officials deny these allegations, insisting that the military is overstretched and under-resourced. At a recent press conference, the Minister of Defense stated, "We are doing everything possible to protect all Nigerians." Yet, activists and international observers point to a troubling pattern of bias. The majority of top security positions are held by ethnic Fulani, the same group implicated in many attacks. Critics argue that this concentration of power has led to selective enforcement and a lack of accountability. Corruption and political interests further complicate the crisis, leaving vulnerable communities exposed to repeated attacks. Protesters across Nigeria have demanded reforms, but meaningful change has been slow. International pressure is mounting. The United States, United Nations, and European Union have called for transparent investigations and security sector reforms. But for many Nigerian Christians, the question remains, is this incompetence or complicity? As one activist put it, until there is real accountability, the cycle of violence will continue. The answer may lie in the stories of those left unprotected, and in the courage of those demanding justice. Survivors continue to speak out, risking their safety to demand a future where every Nigerian is protected, regardless of faith. Behind every statistic is a living story. Mothers, fathers, children, and elders, each carrying memories of loss, courage, and hope. Their voices echo through the silence left by violence. Grace, a mother from Benue State, wrote in a letter found in the ashes of her home, "They burned everything, but I still have my faith. My children ask if we will ever go home. I tell them, as long as we have each other, we are home." Pastor Samuel from Kaduna remembers, "We gathered in the church to pray for peace. When the shooting started, I shielded the children behind the altar. I lost half my congregation that night, but I will not stop preaching hope." Blessing, a teenage survivor, shares, "I still hear the screams at night, but in the camp, I found friends who understand. We draw pictures of our homes and sing together, praying for our families." Elder Musa, who lost his wife and home, says, "Each night, I light a candle for those we lost. In our prayer circle, I find strength to face another day." For many, the trauma is invisible. Counselors and faith leaders lead group therapy and trauma healing workshops. Survivors gather in circles, sharing stories and tears, finding hope in community. Aid worker Fatima describes, "We bring food, medicine, and comfort. Sometimes just listening is the greatest help we can give. The children's laughter, even for a moment, is a sign of resilience." Memorials are held in open fields and makeshift chapels. Survivors light candles, sing hymns, and read the names of the lost. Each act of remembrance is a step toward healing. Rebuilding is slow and uncertain. Many survivors dream of returning home, but for now they build new lives. One prayer, one meal, one day at a time. Their faith endures, shining through the darkness. While the darkness in Nigeria is deep, a global movement for justice is gaining momentum. From New York to Berlin, people of all backgrounds are rallying in solidarity with Nigeria's Christians, demanding that the world pay attention and act. Across continents, advocacy groups like Open Doors, Amnesty International, and Christian Solidarity Worldwide are leading coordinated campaigns, organizing international days of prayer, lobbying parliaments, and launching urgent action appeals. Their efforts have brought the crisis to the attention of policymakers and the public alike. The Nigerian diaspora has become a powerful force, organizing rallies in London, Washington, and Berlin, and meeting with lawmakers at the United Nations and U.S. Congress. Their petitions and testimonies have helped secure hearings, resolutions, and increased humanitarian aid. Social media campaigns like #PrayForNigeria and #StopTheKillings have gone viral, mobilizing millions and pressuring governments to respond. Online petitions, trending hashtags, and viral videos have amplified survivors' voices and kept the crisis in the global conversation. Interfaith coalitions, Christian, Muslim, and Jewish leaders have issued joint statements condemning the violence and calling for peace. These alliances show that the fight for justice transcends religion and nationality. High-profile figures, Pope Francis, Archbishop Justin Welby, and celebrities like John Boyega have spoken out, urging the world not to look away. Their advocacy has inspired new waves of support and media coverage. International resolutions have been passed in the U.S. Congress, European Parliament, and United Nations, condemning the attacks and calling for urgent intervention. These official actions mark important steps, but implementation remains a challenge. Petitions with hundreds of thousands of signatures have been delivered to world leaders, demanding protection for Nigeria's Christians. These grassroots efforts have led to increased humanitarian aid and diplomatic pressure. Media coverage remains a challenge. Many mainstream outlets underreport the crisis, but independent journalists and advocacy platforms are amplifying survivors' voices. Documentaries, podcasts, and investigative reports are helping to break the silence. These efforts have led to real progress, more aid, new policies, and growing international awareness. But the struggle for global attention and decisive action continues, as obstacles like political interest, media bias, and advocacy fatigue remain. The world is watching, the voices of the persecuted are being heard, but the fight for justice is far from over. Continued advocacy, solidarity, and action are needed to turn global awareness into lasting change. Faced with such overwhelming evil, it is easy to feel helpless. But there are real, practical steps each of us can take to make a difference, steps that have already changed lives and rebuilt communities. First, support survivors directly. Donate to vetted organizations providing food, shelter, trauma counseling, and education to displaced families. Groups like Open Doors, International Christian Concern, Red Cross, Caritas, and Médecins Sans Frontières are on the ground making a difference. Visit the websites of these organizations. Most offer secure online donation portals and regular updates on their work. Even small contributions can save lives and help children return to school. Second, raise awareness in your own circles. Share survivor stories, articles, and verified reports on social media. Host informational sessions at your church, mosque, or community center. Invite speakers and use educational materials from groups like Amnesty International and Christian Solidarity Worldwide. Organize or join local donation drives, prayer vigils, and letter-writing campaigns. These events provide material support and show solidarity with Nigerian Christians. In one city, a single vigil raised enough funds to rebuild a destroyed school. Third, advocate for change. Contact your elected officials by email, phone, or social media, and urge them to support resolutions protecting religious minorities in Nigeria. Many advocacy groups provide sample letters and petitions online. Fourth, educate yourself and others. Attend webinars, read reports, and invite both Christian and Muslim speakers to foster interfaith dialogue and understanding. Interfaith coalitions have helped provide shelter and food to displaced families. Connect with Nigerian communities in your area. Many have formed support groups and welcome allies from all backgrounds. Volunteering locally can have a global impact. There are stories of hope, like the village that rebuilt its school with international donations, or the Interfaith Coalition that provided shelter to displaced families. In Jos, a community center now offers trauma counseling and job training thanks to global support. Every action, no matter how small, matters. Together, we can bring light to the darkness and stand in solidarity with the persecuted. Visit the links below for more ways to help. The crisis facing Christians in Nigeria is not only a tragedy of our time, but a test of our shared humanity. History has shown us, whether in Rwanda, Bosnia, or Darfur, what happens when the world stands by as atrocities unfold. Will we repeat those mistakes or choose a different path? Philosopher Hannah Arendt warned of the banality of evil, how ordinary people through silence or indifference become complicit in extraordinary crimes. Empty seats in courtrooms, silent leaders, and forgotten victims are the echoes of inaction. Today, before our very eyes, a systematic campaign of ethnic and religious cleansing is unfolding in Nigeria. The evidence is undeniable. Villages burned, families shattered, faith targeted for extinction. The world's response has been a deafening silence, paralyzed by political correctness, economic interests, and the fear of naming evil for what it is. Survivors wait for justice that never comes, while perpetrators act with impunity. But behind every statistic is a human story. Listen to Grace, a survivor. "We lost everything, but I refuse to lose hope. My children deserve peace." Esther, another mother, pleads, "Tell the world what's happening to us. We cannot survive in silence." Experts warn that inaction now will only embolden the perpetrators and deepen the wounds of division. Dr. Ayo, a peace-building scholar, says, "Justice delayed is justice denied, not just for Nigeria but for us all. The world must not look away. Yet, there is hope." Across Nigeria, courageous individuals are working for reconciliation. Muslim and Christian leaders meeting, communities rebuilding together, children learning side by side. Their courage lights a path forward. International justice mechanisms, like the International Criminal Court, offer a path to accountability. The world must support investigations, document crimes, and demand prosecutions. Only then can healing begin. The consequences of inaction are clear. History will judge us not only for what we did, but for what we failed to do. The time to act is now, but the future is not yet written. If we unite across faiths, nations, and backgrounds, we can help heal wounds, restore justice, and build lasting peace. Stand up, speak out, be the difference. Let us answer this call, not with silence but with sustained action, compassion, and courage. The time to stand for justice is now. The world is watching. Will you stand with Nigeria's Christians? When people of all backgrounds unite and raise their voices, real change becomes possible. Across Nigeria and around the world, communities have come together, organizing vigils, rebuilding homes, and standing in solidarity with the persecuted. As one survivor, Esther, said, "When I saw strangers helping us rebuild, I knew we were not alone." We cannot be bystanders to this injustice. The stories are clear, the evidence undeniable. As survivor Grace shared, your prayers and your voices gave us strength when we had nothing left. Every act of compassion, every word spoken for justice, is a step toward peace. Silence is not an option. We must choose to stand with the vulnerable, to amplify their voices and to demand justice. As Pastor Samuel said, when the world listened, we found hope again. Together we can be the shield for those who cannot speak. This is not just a political issue, it is a human one. No matter our faith or background, we share a moral responsibility to defend the innocent and oppose hatred. In Yos, Christians and Muslims rebuilt a school together. In Abuja, youth of all faiths marched for peace. These acts of courage show that unity is possible and hope endures. Let this be our call to action. Today, let us commit to being a voice for the voiceless, to raising awareness, supporting relief efforts, and pressing leaders to act. As Survivor Blessing said, every day we survive is a victory. Every friend who stands with us is a blessing. Hope is not lost. Every act of kindness, every effort to spread the truth, brings us closer to peace. Share this video, continue the conversation, and speak up for those who cannot. Together, we can shine a light in the darkness. For more information, resources, and ways to help, visit the organizations below. Stand with Nigeria's Christians. Stand for justice. Stand for hope. Together, we can make a difference. If you found this video informative and believe these stories must be heard, take a moment to subscribe and share. Your voice helps amplify the truth. Every like, share, and comment brings these urgent stories to more people. Join our community for deep dives into breaking news, politics, sociology, economics, and social policy, stories that matter most. Click the bell icon to never miss an update, and be part of a movement committed to awareness and change. Thank you for watching, for standing up for justice, and for helping keep these vital conversations alive. Together, we can make a difference.